Hello,
Hi.
how
How
are
are you?
you? I'm fine. How are you?
I am also fine.
Good, good. So today I have chosen to look at The Descent from the Cross by Roger van der Weyden, which was painted around 1435, some say 1436.
Mm.
Um, and it is in the Prado Museum today in Spain, in Madrid. So, would you like to describe this large, busy painting?
Yes. Well, the first thing I think we notice about it is a bit of a funky shape. It's a it is a sort of standard landscape rectangle, but with a kind of little square whacked on top that's also adding to the shape of the painting. It kind of looks like that's there to like fit the cross in, although I'm sure there's a much more logical reason why it's shaped like that. But yeah, so the height of the cross goes up into this sort of central extra bit of the painting. And then you have that traditional descent from the cross structure, which I'll just describe in case someone doesn't know what that means, which is Jesus being brought down from the cross and his like close family and friends are around and his mother Mary has collapsed onto the floor and different characters from the Bible are gathered and helping him carrying his body down. It's got a lot of really bright colours, so the background's like this incredible gold, and the clothing is just incredibly vivid and beautifully rendered. The detail is insane, and yeah, it's also what's strange about it is it's not set in a landscape. It's got
Mm,
this gold background to it, which kind of gives you this feeling of like harking back to Byzantine art, but with this like really strong European realism in the figures and in the fabrics and all the details. So it's quite surreal. They're sort of stood on what looks like grass with
yeah,
bones, the skull, but the background is just gold with a bit of a pattern. So it's
yeah,
quite a strange image that really draws you into the characters and what they're doing, and not no distractions with the background or anything like that.
yeah. That was very impressive description. I would have I would have struggled a lot more.
I
Just because
don't believe you.
it's so busy and yeah, I think it is in lots of ways, like you say, it's a descent from the cross. So it is Jesus's body, and then he's surrounded by
Because
lots
there's
of
certain
mourning
Bible scenes
figures.
that we're used to seeing depicted in similar ways by
Yeah,
different painters across history, and Descent from the Cross is one of them
yeah,
that sort of has a known vague structure to it, right?
yeah, absolutely. And the limpness of Christ's body is usually the central factor,
Hmm.
or at least coming down from the cross.
Yeah.
Um, So, yeah, so as I said, this is by Roger van der Weyden. Oh, sorry, I will give the sources first before I forget. Quite brief. It's Lorne Campbell's 2004 book, Roger van der Weyden, which is very useful.
Hmm.
The Wikipedia pages, of course, on
Always.
the artist, and also on a little bit of like about this the what's called early Netherlandish art, and then the Met's essay on their website called Burgundian Netherlands: Court Life and Patronage, which is quite useful as a bit of an
Mm.
introduction to the context. So before talking about the painting itself, we'll do a bit of a biography of Roger van der Weyden. He was born around 1399 or 1400. He is considered to be one of the most influential painters of 15th century Northern Europe. And in his lifetime, he was highly successful, exporting his paintings to aristocrats and royalty in France and Italy and Spain. He was from Flanders, which is a county of modern day Belgium, France, and the Netherlands.
Hmm.
And I was getting a bit confused about what, like, when we say early Netherlandish painting or the Netherlands, like, I was thinking, okay, but he was born in a town called Tournai, which is present day Belgium. So I was like, why are we saying early Netherlandish art? But just to clarify, that that term, early Netherlandish, refers to the Burgundian Netherlands, which referred to an area that encompassed the Low Countries, which is Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg, and also northern France, during a period when it was ruled by the Dukes of Burgundy. So that was from like the end of the 14th century to the end of the 15th century. And then later it was also the Habsburg Netherlands.
Spanish Netherlands. It's
like, yeah, and that's why I'm like, okay, Flanders, the Low Countries, Burgundian Netherlands, like all of this, it is a little bit confusing. So
it is. And we had this before with a Rubens episode as well. We're sort of talking about border differences and why this has been described as this and then been described as that somewhere else, and then why that town is not even in that place that you're talking about.
Yeah, and you know, I think the difficulty as well is that we still use terms like the Netherlands, so then it's a bit strange. But for today, the only real place we need to know about which were part of the Burgundian Netherlands are Tournai, which is where Roger van der Weyden was born, and Brussels, both of which are in present-day Belgium. So if you think about it like that, it makes it slightly easier. But he was born as Rogier de la Pasteur, Rogier, because presumably they were speaking French there. At the time in Tournai, sorry.
All his family was just really fancy for no reason.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to go different.
Yeah. We don't actually know a lot about Van der Weyden's biography, and so what we do have comes from fragmentary civic records mostly, at least from the sources from during his lifetime, partly because the archival sources, for example, in Tournai, were completely destroyed during the Second World War, which is kind of amazing that so much was lost in that way. I mean, to think that a whole town, and obviously that goes across so many places as well. So we know that his father was a knife manufacturer / cutler. I hadn't actually heard of the word cutler before, but
I like that.
Yeah, it sounds quite nice.
In terms of cutlery.
Yeah, exactly. So in 1426, there's a record that he married Elizabeth, the daughter of a shoemaker from Brussels. They would have 4 children overall. But a record from the Painters Guild in 1427 shows that he had entered the workshop of Robert Campin, a painter with whom he shares many stylistic connections. And often when I look at Robert Campin's work, I think I get it confused with Van der Weyden as well. And another source from 1432 records him with the title Master Painter. So although it's slightly blurred, although he joined Robert Campin's workshop in the late 1420s, he may already have been, because he got the title Master Painter quite soon after, he may actually have already been trained when he was in the workshop. It's slightly blurred in that sense. But certainly, you know, we know that there was a connection between those artists. And Robert Campin is one of the key, along with Jan van Eyck. It's kind of Robert Campin, Jan van Eyck are the 2 key figures, early figures of the early Netherlandish painting style. And then
those are the images you conjure when you think about that time.
Yeah, exactly. And when you look at them, it is, in terms of the realism and the drama and just the detail and the illusion of realistic details, it's just wild, actually, that this was happening in the early 1400s.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So by 1435, Van der Weyden was living with his family in Brussels. And this is important because this was the most important residence of the Dukes of Burgundy. So he, from this time, started using the Flemish version of his name, which is Van der Weyden. And from 1436, he held the title Painter of the Town of Brussels, which some say was made just for him. So he was doing really well. He was prestigious. He had a major commission to paint 4 scenes for the Brussels City Hall, which I think have now been lost as well. A lot of his works have been lost, which is very sad.
Yeah.
But he also had major commissions from the Duke of Burgundy, Philip the Good, who was often in Brussels, and then from various princes and patrons, both in Burgundy and Netherlands and abroad. So he may have visited Italy in 1450, and he painted for the House of Este in Ferrara and the Medici family in Florence. But what's really interesting is it didn't really change his style. And one of a Duchess of Milan requested that her court painter, Zanetto Bugato, went to Van der Weyden's workshop. And I read some funny things about this where, like, Zanetto Bugato was apparently really problematic and difficult working in the workshop, and he had to be, like, banned from drinking wine for a year. And, like, Van der Weyden basically...
on this guy.
I know, and, like, Van der Weyden basically had to be persuaded by, like, various dukes and important figures to get him to keep the Duchess of Milan's painter there. So clearly, like, I mean, it's funny, but it also does paint the picture that these kind of court painters were very much also, I guess, diplomatic or social tools in it, really.
Definitely some, like, part-time diplomacy going on when you're sent from court to court and you're communicating with different dukes, duchesses and royal family members, you know, about each other.
Yeah.
It becomes inherent, doesn't it?
Exactly, and it becomes part of, you know, the style of Van der Weyden is going to be learnt by Zanetto and then taken back, and so it's this exchange of skills and style, but then the style in itself also represents a court so it's really an interesting overlap in all of these figures. He was increasingly wealthy over his career, and he also had he was somewhat of a philanthropist, so he apparently gave generously in alms to the poor, and he also was the administrator of a hospital and a charitable foundation at a convent in Brussels for only 2 years, though. I was like, well, you know, it's only a couple of years, but he was a busy man, clearly, so... And yeah, he died in 1464 in Brussels, still with a very good reputation, and I think during his life as well, there was things being written about him being one of the greatest painters and things like that. So
yeah,
quite different to last week's Winslow Homer. Not the critics writing about him, but the financial success.
How that translated into a living.
Yeah, exactly. And I thought it was quite interesting that by the 18th century, Van der Weyden was almost completely forgotten.
Really?
Yeah, along with a lot of Northern Renaissance painters. And then it was kind of gradually over the 19th century and then really in the 20th century that he became celebrated again.
Wow.
So, yeah, in terms of this painting and, like, why it was made and who it was made for, we have some sources from the 16th and 17th centuries that suggest it was made for a chapel in Louvain, which was called the Chapel of Our Lady Without the Walls, which is kind of funny. The Lady Without the Walls. I don't know what that means.
Love that. That's great.
Yeah.
What on earth that means.
Yeah, it sounds kind of surely like a chapel or surely it should be with the walls. No,
Does the lady not have walls or the chapel not have walls?
Well, exactly. I hope the chapel has walls, but I also imagine they wanted ladies to be contained in walls at the time, so I'm a bit confused.
Yeah.
Anyway, the sources we have for that is basically that the painting was apparently acquired from the chapel in Louvain by Mary of Hungary, who was regent of the Netherlands, and then that's in the 16th century, and then she later gave it as part of a wider gift of paintings to her nephew, who was Philip II of Spain, in
Right.
1574. And so the painting ended up in the Escorial at the Royal Palace outside of Madrid. And
So was it rescued from the fire?
yeah, it must have been. When was the fire? Like, not that long after that, no?
The fire was in Velasquez's time, or just after, I think. No, it was
Okay.
after. It was after. It's later.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, thank goodness. It survived. And it actually stayed in the Escorial until 1939 when it was transferred to the Prado.
Oh, okay. When
And
was?
the paintings there.
Yes,
They
yes.
do.
Not as
Okay.
many as.
But yeah, so to go back to the commission, apparently it was so the Chapel of Our Lady Without the Walls was founded in the 14th century by the Great
Wow.
Archers Guild of Louvain, and that guild probably commissioned the painting for the chapel. And actually, I had to really zoom in on it, but you can actually see very tiny crossbows. Yeah, but I looked at it and thought, oh yeah, well they look quite. It's like Gothic tracery kind of
Right.
pattern. And I thought, oh yeah, they look like arrows, sure. And then I actually zoomed in, and there's a tiny, tiny crossbow
Wow.
hanging in each one. So it's really is a crossbow in there. But it's quite funny that it was made for the Archers Guild. I mean, okay.
Yeah.
Um, and apparently, in the inventory from the Escorial in 1574, the painting is described as being the central panel of a polyptych with wings. So, polyptych I actually looked up because I'm used to diptych and triptych, but apparently a polyptych is just a painting with more than 3 leaves or panels.
Oh, okay. So they just give up after three.
Yeah,
That's
basically.
good to know.
I guess it's like the poly, like it's just
Yeah.
more
No,
than
I
one.
have wondered before what it is when it's 4 panels, so that's good to know.
Yeah. Um, but obviously the wings have since been lost. Don't know when or where, but apparently, at least in the inventory, it says that they represented the evangelists and the resurrection.
Okay.
On those. So it's interesting to think that this, first of all, it was made for a chapel. Second of all, it was definitely, as is so often the case with altarpiece paintings that have been removed from their original context, there were so many other images around them.
Mm.
But to think that this was probably also Van der Weyden actually made it with other paintings is quite interesting. And yeah, so I guess I can start maybe to look more in detail at the painting. I think maybe just starting with the characters that are in there
Hmm.
is useful. So going from, I think there are 10. Yeah, there are 10. Going from left to right, there's Mary, and you're better at this because you went to a Christian school, so you might have to help me with the pronunciation. What is it? Mary Cleophas?
I've got to get that up again to
Okay.
read it
Well,
again.
okay. The guy in the red gown to the left is Saint John the Evangelist.
Hmm.
And then behind him, in a white veil, is Mary Cleophas.
Cleophas?
Cleophas, thank you. And then in the green, well, then there's Virgin Mary in the very bright blue dress, who's fainted on the floor. And then above her, holding her up, is Mary Salome.
Hmm.
Then holding Christ's body is Nicodemus, the
Hmm.
old guy with a beard behind. Then, like as you said, there's that really weird. There's the cross, which is actually just in a shape of a T,
Yeah.
like the letter T. The servant is in that small space above, up a ladder. And then holding up Jesus's legs is Joseph of Arimathea.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. Arimathea, Arimathea.
Arimathea. Okay. Is that just Joseph?
I don't know. I don't know if you would say of Arimathea if it was Joseph. I'm not
Joseph,
sure.
yeah. Oh, well, is it Joseph? And
One of
then
the group.
behind him is a servant who I think he's the one that we can see least of his body, actually. He's just this guy like poking his head around, having a look at what's going on.
Mm.
And then Mary Magdalene is the final figure to the right. And what is amazing about this is that, well, first of all, it's a huge painting, and like you've seen it in the Prado, right?
To take you back to Joseph of
Oh yeah.
Arimathea, I've looked up for you.
Okay.
Joseph of Arimathea is a biblical figure who assumed responsibility for the burial of Jesus after his crucifixion.
Ah, good for him taking initiative, you
Yeah,
know?
so not Joseph's quote unquote father.
Oh, okay. Well, where's Joseph in this, you know? Like, what's he doing? Shouldn't
That's a
he be there to
responsibility.
support Mary?
I don't know, maybe he's busy building some tables and chairs and
That's
the
outrageous.
carpentry. Sorry, right, as we were.
No, I was saying it's a huge painting.
Yeah.
It's over 8 feet wide. And I know that when I saw it in the Prado last year, it was the most affecting emotional painting one of the ones that I've ever seen, actually.
Mm,
Um, and it was funny as well, like getting there. It's one of the ones that was really on the tour in the
yeah.
Prado. Like, so I rushed in on the few mornings I was there. That was the first painting I would go to
Mm,
because it was for the first like 5 minutes of the Prado being open is actually quiet. And I
yeah.
think it is hard to have an emotional connection with this painting when you have like five tour groups around you talking about basically what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah.
But
There's
just to
definitely like certain
emphasize,
paintings in the
yeah,
Prado that get just absolutely mobbed. I think like two rooms over is the Bosch as well, so that gets
yeah,
completely that
it's a
room is
crazy
mobbed.
area, yeah. But I really recommend if anybody's going to the Prado that that's the one that you make a beeline for
Yeah,
in
or
the
be there
morning.
right before. Like some afternoons, I think are free entry. So if you are there, if you're in anyway, and it's right before the free entry starts, it gets quite quiet because there's
Good
less people
point.
coming in before free entry starts. So
That's
that's
such a
quite
point,
good,
yeah.
like towards the end of the afternoon.
Yeah, I wanted to say it because I think like there's so much to say technically and compositionally about this painting, but I do think there's something about just standing in front of it that
It's
is
incredible.
just amazing.
And when you consider that we look at it and we revere it, and it's like this famous piece of oil painting, and then when you think it wasn't even the only, there was a whole extra, it was like three or four more pieces to it. And
Yeah,
it's already so revered as one of the greatest paintings, and then there was so much extra that's missing. It's actually mind blowing.
yeah. And to think of it being in a chapel with the candles flickering against that golden background and the incense and the singing, and it's amazing. Like as a
Mm,
whole, the to think about the impact that would have had. Because it still has so much of the impact in the Prado, and you're like, oh my gosh, I think I'd lose my mind if I saw it in a chapel.
yeah.
Maybe I'd convert, you know.
Maybe
It
I
would
take
take a
that back.
lot, but like, maybe Van der Weyden is the way that would
Mm,
happen. Anyway, apparently, so to think about the composition, the painting centers, if we're going to break it down and kind of make it a little bit more, I guess, yeah, less emotional and more like technical, the painting centers, I would say, around two key diagonals. So it's the
mm,
diagonal body of the dead Christ in the center, and then below him, a bit to the left, you've got the diagonal body of the fainting Virgin Mary.
yeah.
And then on either side, you have two kind of brackets. There's St. John the Evangelist on the left, and then Mary Magdalene on the right. Um, and at first, the figures all give an impression of stability. And often this is talked about, I say that in the sense that they seem very sculptural, and frozen in time and frozen in a moment.
Mm.
And also like the balance of contours and say like the brackets and the diagonals, plus the naturalistic details. Like it feels like this is well, I mean, and it certainly is true. This is an artist who really knows like what this composition is going to be.
Yeah.
And we know this as well because given like technical analysis, there have been hardly any signs or very minor signs of alterations during the painting process. So clearly this was like the composition was very carefully laid out before painting.
Yeah.
But as Lorna Campbell in her book writes, actually none of the 10 figures are stably posed, really. If we look more closely, their poses are often unfeasible and often kind of off balance. So they look actually like they could lose their balance at any moment. I think like there's also just well, we'll talk more about like the spatial aspect of this. So like well, I'll talk about that in a bit, but it's definitely kind of hard to see how these figures in real life, like we talk about the naturalism, but if you look at where their feet are or how they're bent and the poses they're in, it's actually really not that naturalistic.
Yeah.
I don't know, like you can see the man carrying Jesus, is that Nicodemus? He like look, if you look at his knees and how he's like leaning backwards and actually how unstable, like we can see one of his feet on the floor.
Oh yeah, I didn't notice his like dainty little shoed leg coming out.
Yeah, like he's about to fall backwards, this guy. Like,
Yeah.
even if you look at then like Joseph of Arimathea, Joseph, he's just the Joseph guy. If you look at his feet, like one of his feet is like at such a weird angle.
Yeah, I don't think that looks physically
Yeah.
possible.
Like yeah, so it's all actually quite strange. And I think when you are in front of the painting, it's one of those where just the longer you look, the more you start to notice the instability.
I think it does that thing that I really love playing with as an idea, is the idea that people can confuse detail and accuracy.
Yeah.
So like if you make something beautifully rendered and detailed, it has this weight of accuracy to it that you can play with. You know, play scale, play with shapes, play with just the balance of things. And by making them very detailed, you can confuse the eye, and it takes people longer to dissolve the image, I think.
Yeah, that's so and it draws them in then.
Yeah.
To be looking and making these connections. And yeah. So definitely the idea of confusing or destabilizing is central to this. But also it's definitely this painting is discussed often as this is about Van der Weyden appealing more to the viewer's emotional and aesthetic sensibilities rather than about creating a narrative. So he's distorting the forms to increase the expressive or decorative as well appeal. So I think another really good example is the Virgin Mary's legs, which we can't see because they're covered in the blue fabric of her dress. Her legs and the fabric, they actually hide where the cross meets the ground. And if we actually saw where the cross meets the ground, it would make, especially given the fact that there's no background, there is the vegetation on the floor, but there's no background, it would probably make the inconsistencies in the space too obvious.
Yeah.
So yeah, like you say, it's I love that you say about it's like playing with the detail to kind of confuse and yeah.
That's what I think is fascinating, because personally I've done things that are like very detailed, and then someone will go, is that a real place? Then you'll be like, absolutely not. None of this makes any architectural sense. But it's like about detail that tricks the eye and the mind, even if only for a very short moment. And I think that's really fun to play with, and really interesting when you dissolve it in a work yourself, when you look at it more and you think, actually, you know. Sort of like
Yeah.
Ang with his massively long arms, or, you know,
Yeah.
some Rubens paintings with crazy legs and arms and things like, and that just don't make sense, but there's like a confidence in the detail.
Yeah. It's so true, so interesting. And so and just to expand on it, like Van der Weyden, obviously, as we've said, he's known for his naturalism, and he
Mm.
apparently did work with life models. But the key to understanding this, like you say, is that doesn't mean it's an absence of idealization.
Mm.
So, and apparently Campbell writes that Netherlanders, people at the time, expected paintings to be credibly naturalistic, but veracity was not their ultimate or dominant aim.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, so that, I mean, it's a helpful reminder for me, like next time in the National Gallery looking at Robert Campau or Van der Weyden there, like, yeah, it's an important distinction.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like I said, I mean, the spatial inconsistencies are key to. Lorne Campbell says this is about inducing a calculated feeling of unease in the spectator, who
Mm.
cannot be sure whether he is looking at the image of an image or the representation of an event. And I think that takes us to think it's not just about the naturalism, it's also about the space. Like you said, it's this golden background. And actually, as you were describing it, I realized like the figures who are quite unquote closest to the background, they actually, you can see their shadows on it as well.
Yeah. And the background has edges to it, like they're in a gold box. Like if you look at behind Mary
Yeah.
Magdalene, there's like it's not just a gold wall like behind them, it's like they're in a gold box.
Yeah. Yeah, and also as you said, I just realized as well, above, like next to the cross, there's also like to the left there's a bit of like a vertical strip of light,
Mm.
which seems to show like a slight amount of depth, but not enough that it would seem to fit the servant guy up the ladder.
Yeah.
So in many ways, like I said, this is very close to sculpture, and often like one of the first things people will talk about with the framing and the box and the background is that this painting was very closely related to carved altarpieces and actual
Mm.
sculptures at the time. And so apparently the original frame has been lost, but like you say, there is a painted frame within it as
Yeah.
well, which may actually have been a painted extension of the first, like the original frame. But yeah, there's something, I love what Lorne Campbell says about like, is this an image of an image? And it does seem very self-conscious as an image. And yeah, I think like, it's just these layers of like, he's clearly not wanting us to just look at this as like, oh, this is the descent from the cross, but this is like, what is the image of the descent from the cross doing?
Well, I think a straight up people on a hill descent from the cross, landscape in the background is almost easier for him to do than to create something that holds together on first look and then slowly dissolves into all these questions, but still
Yeah.
has this like weight and gravity and emotion to it that does all these things. That's so much harder to do than just create for some figures in the landscape, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also, like, the more I look at it, it's also just really funny how the cross, like, that's apparently what Jesus has just been taken down from. But there
Yeah, I
is no
don't really understand
way
that.
that it's so short. Like the top part of the cross is so short. It
Yeah.
would not hold his body.
No, it'd be like he's sort of hoiked under his armpits or
Yeah.
something.
Like, what is this? Um, the other thing that really comes up, and this is another, probably the most famous thing I think about this painting, is the tears in it. So you can see, like, I think on at least half of the figures in it, there are tears. So you've got Mary Magdalene, Joseph, the two other Marys, actually the three other Marys. There are so many Marys. And St. John the Evangelist. They have these tears that are so realistic They are like glinting and three-dimensional. That
They're one of the most famous details in art, which is
probably, yeah.
yeah,
It's
when
a
you have like a book of like it's always like a zoom in on the tears and the Roger van der Weyden. I think I've seen so many close crops of this painting before.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I think that's actually the first images I saw of it
Mm.
were actually the crops of the tears.
Hmm.
Um, and there had been a lot of paintings up to this point of grief-stricken faces and like people crying, but not with the literal tears
Mm.
detail. So I mean, apparently this is them partly to do with them expressing compassio, which is compassion in Latin, which is very like a really important part of this period in terms of the worship, Christian worship, and like this would be about wanting the viewer to really feel like almost physically, like affectively, certainly connected to Christ's pain and the sorrow of his family and disciples. But it's also apparently showing that like the figures around Christ in this painting are feeling that
Hmm.
compassion. Also, the Virgin Mary is so white in this. Like she's more white than Christ,
Yeah,
actually.
she looks more color-wise, she looks more dead than him.
Yeah. But her eyes are amazing because they're kind of they look closed, but there's a little bit of her pupils you can still see. Like they're
Mhm.
just yeah. But I thought I'd read this quote of Erwin Panofsky, was a famous art historian in, I mean, 20th century, but 30s is when I know he was writing art. The quote says, all but three of the participants are weeping, and tears still stream over the face of the Mater Dolorosa, though she has collapsed in a death-like faint. It may be said that the painted tear, a shining pearl born of the strongest emotion, epitomizes that which the Italians most admired in early Flemish painting, pictorial brilliance and sentiment. And I think I'm reading that mostly because I love a shining pearl.
Mm,
Because they do feel like that. Like
they
it's quite a
do.
dramatic quote, but I think it's so intense. And and it is a very, I think the tears bring you back into like this is a mother who is witnessing her child being, he's been murdered and is it is really powerful when you stand in front of it, particularly. And
Yeah,
again, the descent from the cross type kind of becomes less obvious, like it becomes more of an emotional thing. Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, I think the final thing I'll say is that the hands in this were the thing that I just loved as well. Like particularly the Mary
Mm,
Magdalene's pose and the
yeah,
hands. But yeah, I hope people can see this in person.
definitely. It's absolutely worth a trip to go see it.